Hi, I'm Alison Sampson. I'm the Public Information Officer for Environmental Health, Public Health, and the Neurosciences. So there's about 5 Public Information Officers that work across the Academic Health Center medical campus. We all kind of have our own beats, and so my beat area, which I love, is, like I said, environmental public health, and then all the neurosciences that are covered by that. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about the science news cycle, communicating to the media. So this was a cartoon that was shared at a recent staff meeting by Richard Puff, who's our VP of Public Relations at the Academic Health Center. And it's pretty accurate. You start with your research up there. You communicate it, ideally, to the university PR office, and every university has one. That's picked up by newswire organizations if we issue a release. It then might be posted to various blogs, news outlets. Yes, sometimes it starts to get twisted and misinterpreted. Before you know it, it's like, oh, this thing will kill you, right? So I realized quickly in the first couple of months I was here, I was like, oh my gosh, everything will kill you, right? So anyway, I'm going to talk a little bit today, though, about why you shouldn't be scared of the media, why it's great to work with them. There are definitely some benefits about communicating your science and research. So it's a great way to promote and support your institution, UC, or wherever you might end up, to get your message out. It's definitely good to help the media get the story right. They might have a story idea. They're looking for an expert. We can help suggest that. If you think, I don't really know that much about XYZ, actually, you probably know a lot more than the reporter does, and you can help guide them because you know what? They're still going to get the story without you. So if we say no, they're going to go down the street and ask somebody else. So it's always a nice way to, get the chance for the university to control the message. Also, personally, it's great for career development, just like experience with public speaking. It's great to gain experience with media. And it's a way to consider your work through a broader lens, through, what is the mass, what does the public think of the work that I'm doing, and why does it matter? So how the media works. Reporters live on deadlines. Sometimes they have a couple hours. Sometimes they have a couple days. But they always have that deadline that they're looking to. So they're just trying to do their jobs like you are. Most of them are generally, they're authentically enthusiastic about trying to, report on this story. They're not really out to get you. So your job is to kind of help them understand, the true thing about your research. So what makes news today? Anything editors and reporters feel will get interest for their readers and viewers. We see a lot with trends, breakthroughs, controversy, bad things, and yes, we get a lot of weird requests for clickbaity type stuff. I was thinking as I was walking over here, one of the first weeks I was here, we got actually 2 media requests on the same topic, was about drinking urine and how the health benefits might be for drinking urine. And I thought, oh my gosh, I am not calling any of my sources with that, right? Like, I'm not reaching out to an expert. That's laughable. We actually did get a doctor to respond to it who said, no way is there a health benefit for drinking urine. So I thought, we still got to control the story, right? Somebody was willing, and certainly if you don't feel like you want to talk about that, we understand. But, don't kill the messenger. Sometimes we just want to throw it out there and pass along, hey, look, we got this media request. We know it's ridiculous. Do you want to, bat it down? Do you want to not respond? That sort of thing. So we definitely get a lot of strange, oddball inquiries. So how we in the UC Public Relations Office approach media, as Dr. Haynes was saying, mostly if you're a lead researcher, a lead publisher, we will issue a news release, a media release. Also, if you've partnered with research and it's going into a big journal or it's with another big university, we may also do a media release on that, but we would partner with that institution because lead author definitely gets the lead media release. In addition to releases, we will get inquiries for experts, especially on trending topics like I mentioned. Zika virus is big. The opioid crisis is huge. We probably get requests for experts on different aspects of the heroin problem, the opioid crisis, daily, I would say. Also, there's always these seasonal topics that come up. When it's a certain awareness month or awareness week, the media will call us and say, hey, do you have an expert on, suicide prevention, breast cancer awareness? It's a good opportunity to do radio shows and TV related to that. But what we always want you to do is contact us first. It's great to keep the Media Relations Office in the loop. Definitely if you have a conference presentation coming up, if you know you have research that was accepted for publication, contact us. We'd be happy to help you with a news release, to help you kind of manage scheduling media interviews if you start to get calls directly. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Also other news in terms of like grants, board appointments, things like that are good news to share with like our internal communications that go across the university. They may not be that much of an interest to media, but you know, it's great to share your good news across the university. So this is our health news website currently. We're hoping we'll get a new one because this one isn't very mobile friendly. An example of a recent environmental health release was the grant renewal for the ERC, the Education and Research Center. So, you know, that has worked its way into some little news announcements, nothing big, but I know a lot of times with research announcements too, you have to be patient. Sometimes things, you know, even like the firefighter research, sometimes it just like you have research going for years and years, and all of a sudden somebody finds it, they're interested, they want to talk to you, and then you're ready. So, scheduling an interview. As I would say, if by chance a reporter, someone has Googled, you know, a certain topic, and they find out a research paper authored by you, they look up your information at the university website, they call you directly, do not feel like you have to talk to them in that moment. In fact, it's probably better to say, give me a minute, what's your deadline, can I call you back? Then you call us, we can help talk you through it if you want, you know, maybe we know the reporter, we know the media outlet, we can give you some tips, but at the very least, it gives you a little time to kind of think, you know, prep a little bit, and usually they have a deadline and they are welcome to schedule within reason. So then you want to take some time to prepare for your interview, understand what the scope of the request is from the reporter. Don't let them be too vague. I mean, you want to ask them specifically, like, what's the story about? Am I the only person being interviewed here? So, you know, also, is it a phone, face-to-face, print, or broadcast? Absolutely. If there's ever a TV camera that's going to show up on campus, they need to be escorted by our university relations office. There are definitely a lot of administrators that do not want to see camera crews running around campus. And then think about what you want out of the interview. Maybe it's helpful for you to prep 3 to 5 talking points that you can kind of think about and go over, especially if it's going to be a phone interview. So some interview basics. Similar to what Dr. Haynes was saying, you want to be genuine, be authentic. It's okay if you get a question to say, I don't know, or to offer, they maybe ask you about a statistic that you're not quite familiar with, and you say, I'll look that up, you know, and I can email it to you. And I've had that happen several times with reporter interviews, and they're totally happy about that. I wouldn't say, you know, to ask the reporter, can I read it before you publish it, because they almost will never do that. But if it's a very technical topic, a lot of details, they might run that by you and say, okay, yeah, do you mind fact-checking this for me? I was saying it this way. Is that okay? And it's also good if you're on a time crunch to let the reporter know. Like, if they show up for a face-to-face interview and then you have to run across campus in a half an hour, you know, let them know, like, hey, I've only got this much time. For TV interviews, you want to consider the visual location. If you're in an office setting, a lab setting, this doesn't apply to you all as much, but patient care areas, a lot of times cameras like to be there, but there's a lot of things we have to make sure are okay and clear before we go into a hospital, obviously. You want to avoid any distractions, people that might be walking around. If they want to film you in the lab, is it going to be noisy? Are there generators and things running? Things like that. If you can wear your white coat with the UC logo, we love that. I know that doesn't always feel appropriate. If you're like, well, I'm a statistics person. I don't really like work in a lab. Maybe you have your UC diploma behind you or some other UC prop in the background. We like to kind of think about what's going to be right in the background behind the camera. Solid colors are good, and certainly body language is important. If you are in a live TV interview or on a radio show, be sure to speak up. Let them know if your headphones aren't comfortable or you can't hear, you can't see yourself in the monitor. You know, tell them all that as they're kind of getting you ready, because they're doing this all the time. They're moving very quickly, and it's okay to say, wait a second, now, do I stand here? Do I look at you? That's great. Remember to know that you're live, and you can probably get an understanding of what the questions will be ahead of time. But there's also going to be some surprise questions, so you might want to be prepared for that. I know yesterday, well, in the last couple days, because this is a neurology media request, but because former Cincinnati Police Chief Blackwell had a stroke in Columbus, we got a bunch of media calls about that. We had a couple guys that went on WLW radio, and I said, you might just want to be prepared. Chief Blackwell is a little bit of a polarizing figure. They may, because it's talk radio, try to throw you some zingers. And they didn't do too bad. It was fine. It went really well. But just to let you guys know, we can prepare you for that. Yeah.
One thing I would just add to that, because I've been interviewed on the radio, and my recommendation is always stand up when you're being interviewed on the radio. If you're sitting down, you're too relaxed, and you're not really terribly tuned in maybe to the subtlety of the questions. You're leaning back in your chair, but if you're standing up during the interview, you are on full alert to what the question is being asked and what you're saying and the implication of it. So
that's a good tip. And actually, when we've gone through, WVXU, a lot of those announcers, they have like standing desks now that they do their reporting from and everything. So that's a good point. Related to radio interviews, it's great to use a landline or office phone. Don't call from your car. Don't call from a cell phone. That can really break up and not sound very good, and then it kind of reflects poorly on you. Also, for radio shows, there's sometimes a call-in component. And usually the radio producers are really great about managing that. They'll screen the calls, but that's something, too, you want to kind of be aware of or maybe ask before you do a radio show. Question and answers. So because, a reporter's knowledge of your field of research is probably pretty thin. They just saw another news story or they had the idea, they ran with it, and your body of knowledge is pretty deep. You want to kind of take maybe their simple questions and elaborate on them. Feel free to kind of say and let me tell you this, to kind of extrapolate on what they're asking, because they may be asking sort of simple, straightforward questions, but you kind of get the opportunity to get your sound bites in there. You certainly don't want to give personal opinions. You're speaking on behalf of your organization. You don't want to speculate or diagnose. Don't respond to blind sources. If it's as I said, always contact us first, but if it's an organization you're not familiar with, we can kind of do some background checking, especially in the areas, there's, a lot of sensitive areas in terms of environmental health, too, that you don't know, there's bloggers out there and media that kind of have a different twist on things, so you want to always kind of check with us before you know who you're talking to. Never say this is off the record, but blah, blah, blah. Just don't say it. And don't use a lot of jargon or acronyms that they won't understand. Make sure you're kind of over-explaining things. So you always want to speak clearly and explain technical terms or concepts as you maybe would to a neighbor, sibling, or sixth grader, kind of like Dr. Haynes was saying. And using analogies is a great way to do things. And make sure you show that you're really passionate and enthusiastic about your work. That will make the reporter want to come back. Also, kind of to add on to that sort of like question and answer plus one, another great thing is, maybe they've called because they want an expert on something and it's not fully your area, but you're willing to talk to them about it. That's a great time at the end of the interview to say oh, and actually I have a study coming out in a couple months that's about this. Would you be interested? And then that kind of gives them a reason to follow up. And then I can always do the job of, when your paper's published, I'll follow up with that reporter. That just happened to us recently, that we had a faculty member who was interviewed over the summer about a current event, and now he's got a paper published that's kind of related to that, and Channel 9's interested in doing a follow-up story. So certainly say what only you would be comfortable seeing and hearing in print or on air. While you may just be in the room or on the phone with the reporter, realize that they are communicating on behalf of mass media. So it's good to look at the reporter. They'll tell you in the camera, and make sure you turn off your cell phone, pagers, any other distractions during the interview. As I said, sound bites are great. You may talk for a long time. I've had interviews that go 10 minutes, an hour. National news has come before. They take 4 hours, and yet they all still end up using about 10 seconds of what you say. So sound bites are important. You know, sum up in little nuggets, you know, what the bottom line is of your research. At the end of the interview, reporters will almost always say, is there anything else? Or, you know, is there something I didn't ask you? And that's your chance, if there was something that wasn't covered, that you can kind of, you know, add that, give them the update about some research you might have coming out or a conference coming up, plug an event maybe that you're working on. Remind them that they can follow up with you if they have questions. And again, like with facts or quotes, if they want clarification, you're happy to be available to respond to that. And it's good to find out when they might run the story, too.
So you can watch it.
That's right. So as we were talking about, so last week was kind of interesting. We've been great. WCPO has been doing a ton of work with us lately. I was actually here over in Kettering working on one interview with Dr. Kim Dietrich about some lead test results when I got another query that wanted to do a story about the Coleraine Fire Department that's seeking to, incorporate some of these decontamination methods. And I knew that Dr. LeMasters was the expert on it. We reached out to her first. She was out of town. And then she said, why don't you call Dr. Haynes? I was like waiting in the hallway, trying to find her. I mean, so that was a great example of people being available, flexible, adaptable. And I know that's not always easy. I know we sometimes feel like an intrusion. You have grant deadlines, you have classes, you have meetings. But the more adaptable and available you can be is great, because sometimes, like this reporter had an hour, basically. She was driving to campus. I was telling her I was trying to find somebody. It was a little kooky, and that's not normally the way we like to do it. But with TV, definitely, they pretty much want their story done by 4 o'clock, and then they're done. So we have to kind of roll with what their deadlines are. So also, for example, is that okay? I think it's fine. But it's kind of a good example of they did the interview, and then and the story was good, but they used about 4 seconds of our UC expert. So
we were really happy with the last piece, and then they chose the first piece. You can't control what
right, you can't control. You might think, oh, I said that perfectly, and then they pick a different part, and you're like, well.
The link between
it's a whole new kind of workout. It's running, cycling, weights, resistance, endurance. You want something more?
Is it doing that thing where it opened again? I don't know. All right.
SpeedoUSA.com.
I know. I was going to move the
The link between cancer among firefighters has become a growing concern. Studies show their jobs expose them to a higher risk for certain types of cancer.
But now one Tri-State Fire Department is taking an extra step to help lower that risk. Not on your sides, Brianna Harper explains.
Firefighting is a tough job, but someone has to do it. Studies show battling flames, smoke, and soot on the day-to-day basis can eventually wreak havoc on a firefighter's health. Inexperienced Coleraine Fire Chief Frank Cook has seen firsthand.
Over the course of my 32 years, I've seen a number of personal friends and other colleagues that have been stricken with this disease.
This disease, known as cancer. Researchers say for firefighters, their greatest risk is for cancers related to digestive, oral, respiratory, and urinary systems.
The majority of these cancers can be caused by the chemical mix that they're exposed to in the air at the fire scene, and then when they go back and put the fire out and then clean it up.
But for the Coleraine Township Fire Department, the real cleanup begins with this on-scene decontamination kit.
We soap ourselves down, we wash ourselves down, rinse ourselves off in order to get the gross decontamination off.
There's items like this hood and these gloves that generally pose the greatest risk to exposure because they come in direct contact with the skin. That's why the goal is always to have them removed almost immediately after firefighting.
And then comes the heavy-duty cleaning of all the firefighting gear through the specialized machine.
We live here 24 hours a day, we eat here, we sleep here. I mean, this is our secondary home, so you just want to try to do everything that you can to minimize it, that exposure.
Other local fire departments, including Cincinnati and Goshen, are also considering a similar decontamination process. In Coleraine Township, Brianna Harper, 9 on your side.
So the only other thing I had on my slides were just a couple other examples of media we've had. As I mentioned, Dr. Dietrich has been interviewed a lot this year because of the Flint lead crisis. I know Dr. Ying was interviewed by Ann Sager to kind of help him, or to help her interpret some results of a life expectancy survey that came out nationally. So sometimes news will come out nationally, and locally we kind of want some input on, like, well, what does this mean for us locally, or how to interpret it. I can't remember what my third example was, but anyway. So as I said, I'm happy to meet with any of you to learn more about your research or get in touch with me if you've got a news release coming out, conferences, that sort of thing. So thanks for your time.